Okay. You ready? Let's do this. You're listening to Explore Magazine's Live the Adventure podcast. This is the podcast that delves deep into the outdoors, will inspire, inform, and get you stoked to explore. And I'm your host, David Webb. Welcome to episode 12 of Explore Magazine's Live the Adventure podcast. I'm your host, David Webb. Context. Have you ever searched for more context within your adventures? Sure, you go for a hike or a paddle, wildlife watch, but what do these places mean? What do these animals mean? And what stories do they hold that have been passed down for millennia by the indigenous peoples of the land? There's a lot to tell and a lot to learn, and a lot of opportunities for cultural sharing. Today, I'm chatting with Brenda Baptiste, Chair of the Board of Directors for Indigenous Tourism BC. Indigenous Tourism BC helps cultivate, market, educate, innovate, and grow in Indigenous tourism experiences across the province. But what are Indigenous tourism experiences? What could you expect as a visitor? What does this industry look like? How does it contribute to Indigenous communities and to the tourism industry as a whole? And, of course, what does it look like during the time of COVID-19? Brenda and I enjoyed a lively discussion. I hope you learn a lot, and I hope it encourages you to book an Indigenous tourism experience for yourself in BC or wherever you are. Stay tuned for Brenda Baptiste from Indigenous Tourism BC. Brenda, thank you for joining me today on the Live the Adventure podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm Brenda Baptiste. I'm honored to be the chair of Indigenous Tourism British Columbia and have been for a number of years. I'm from the Osuyus Indian Band within the Okanagan Nation, so I am lucky enough to live in Osuyus, BC, now the hottest place in the province.
I was going to say, I'm in Vancouver, and we're recording this at the end of July, and it's hot in Vancouver. It must be 15 degrees hotter where you are right now.
It is, but it's beautiful. We've got lakes and lots of people around, and it's nice to finally see the beginning of the tourist season and welcome our visitors. I just paid a visit to the Infinite Desert Cultural Center this morning, and it was wonderful to see people, within the center and exploring who we are as Okanagan people, and and just us being able to welcome visitors finally.
So the Indigenous Tourism BC, would you mind telling our listeners just what that organization is?
Indigenous Tourism BC is an organization that advocates for Indigenous tourism, and a lot of our Indigenous tourism small businesses, I guess I have to take a bit of a step back. We originally started this process over 20 years ago and realized that our goal was to build economies within First Nations communities. I mean, our communities, we've got over 200 First Nations communities in this province. Out of the 600 throughout Canada, 200 them are in BC.
That's incredible. I mean, the diversity in this one province of the First Nations people is really interesting to me.
Well, and also in the backyards and traditional territories of these communities, you have some of the most pristine, incredibly beautiful natural settings. So we saw the potential. We wanted to create an economy for those First Nations because tourism-based businesses very often don't need to have that hard capital or those storefronts. You can do adventure tourism, cultural tourism, share our stories. But for us, it was also the highest form of self-sufficiency and self-resilience for the communities, because they decide what they want to share with visitors, their stories, their legends, their culture. They train their youth to be able to do that, utilizing the knowledge of traditional cultural knowledge keepers, and then they make the decision about what they're going to share with the visitors and how they're going to do that. So for us, it was a win-win across the board.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So in that saying that when you're looking at Indigenous tourism in BC and Canada, but let's focus on BC, it's not a blanket term. I mean, there's waves and waves and waves of different experiences, from outdoor adventure to cultural to cuisine to, and you're sort of empowering individuals and groups to find what they want to highlight about themselves and what they want to share.
I mean, we're so lucky here within this province. We've got over 400 market-ready Indigenous tourism companies. It's taken us 20 years to build the richness of those offerings within this province, but you've got culinary tourism, great opportunities to have incredible food, cultural venues and museums and cultural centers. You've got golf courses. You've some of the most incredible campgrounds and whale watching, which anybody has ever gone on a whale watching tour, especially from a cultural perspective where you're learning about the importance of the whale to the coastal cultures. It's life-changing. And the whole goal was to not only provide those experiences and empower our communities to do that, but also we wanted it to be a transformative experience and opportunities for our visitors to better understand the importance of Indigenous people in this province and how we are such an important part and sort of foundational to the identity of British Columbia. And it makes British Columbia as a whole that much richer and stronger.
So in the work that ITBC does specifically, like how do you connect with with individuals and groups, and how do you sort of help facilitate what they want to bring to life?
It's very easy. I mean, we've got our stakeholders. We're always in connection with our stakeholders. COVID has provided us with an incredible opportunity where we realized that there was so much going on, and a lot of our tourism-based businesses are basically small businesses. And so we started helping with in terms of resources and providing some grant funding to support them through those periods where they've been closed, absolutely. And that was during the very first part of COVID where there was a complete lockdown. And then we established weekly calls with all of our stakeholders, and to be able to not only give them information about funding that's out there, both federal and provincial, help build capacity on how do you actually navigate your way through this, but also to hear from them. It was so important for us to hear the impact that COVID was having in the various parts of the region and some of those issues and how we could advocate to support them, but also how can we address not only in the short term getting through this period, but looking into the 2021 season, how do we continue to advocate for their support?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, what does it look like right now? I mean, you said in Soyuz, people are welcoming back, and that's obviously around the province. People are coming back into tourism and being welcomed back into communities. But I know within the Indigenous communities, there are several communities that are not yet ready to welcome people back. And so what does that look like in terms of the tourism industry for ITBC members and stakeholders? Like, how do you navigate that?
Well, it's been quite challenging. We've got about 40% of the Indigenous tourism businesses across the province that are open right now, and we're working with the other 60 to look at what is that long-term sustainability plan. How can we embrace innovation like technology? We've got some great stories of some of our retail partners, for example, some retail stores who are really embracing technology and doing online retail. I was just meeting with one the other day, and she's like, our retail store is actually doing better than our storefront. Right? And so continuing to do that process, looking at how can we provide cultural experiences and day-long experiences for a fee using technology and using Zoom. And so we've been able to people have been so creative. I mean, Indigenous people are very resilient anyway, and for us it's been really positive to see not only that resilience, but that innovation and creativity. Because at the end of the day, the desire to share your identity and who you are as an Indigenous person and your culture with your visitors is very strong, and it's so important to not only our economy, but our identity in the province.
Oh, that's interesting. So culturally, you would say that there is a desire to share, which led into tourism being such a good fit, I guess you would say?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, when you look at the history of Indigenous people, even pre-contact, we were traders, we were business people, we did a lot of trading back and forth across the border and through the coast. And so this economic business sense is really part of our history. And a lot of the communities had already started. As a matter of fact, when I first joined ITBC, like 20-something years ago, I was running the campground for the Osuyas Indian Band. It was hilarious because one of the consultants called me. She was doing this survey, and she said, okay, well, you have a tourism-based business, and we want to get some information. And my response was, what do you mean, tourist? Like, I had no idea that it was even a tourism-based business. So we had a lot of sort of teaching and learning, capacity building over the last 20 years, but there were communities that were already doing it. We just gave them the ability to market their businesses, to refine some of the business planning, to look at what are those opportunities so they could expand their businesses in a significant way, which we've done over the last 20 years, right?
I know it must be interesting for some people to have these experiences that perhaps they've been showing people for a long time to really realize that like you can market this internationally and you can bring people in from Germany and China and all over the world and they just want to come and hear your stories. And it must be a very, very empowering thing to hear that you had this all along and that just focused and marketed and you can use your natural resources like yourself, your stories, your culture to make a viable business is an exciting time, I would guess.
Well, and I think it's what's made it so wonderful is that Indigenous tourism is transformative in nature, right? Mm-hmm. It is not just about us showcasing our culture and who we are as Indigenous people. There's this relationship that's built with our visitors. So we learn about their culture and learn about their history and, whether they're from Germany or England or Scotland, at the end of the day, everyone comes from somewhere. And so being able to have them kind of trace their history and their staff, their families and celebrate who they are. The powerful thing about Indigenous tourism is that it's so apparent to us because we haven't had contact for a whole lot of time. And so people see, oh, okay, well, Canada's only been around for a few hundred years. Well, my people in Scotland or England have been around for centuries and centuries, but the Indigenous people here have been around for centuries and centuries too. And so to make that connection and kind of look at their own identity of who they are and celebrate their history is so important to this process.
Yeah, I find that's an interesting point. I've been on some media tours before where we visited some Indigenous operators, like Wanaskewin in Saskatoon comes to mind because I was just there recently. And there were some people on the group that were from outside of Canada. And like you said, people have this idea, especially European people, that the Canada is such a new country. It's like, oh, everything's so new here. Everything's so new here. And then they show them a 6,500-year-old archaeological dig. And it's like, yeah, not so new. It's like, change your mind. You know what I mean? Like, open your thoughts here because that maple leaf flag is the thing that's new. That's the thing that's new, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. There must be a lot of benefit to this tourism beyond financially to various Indigenous groups around the country. I wonder if you could speak to that because it's such an economic boom. I mean, tourism has, until obviously very recently, has been so great for so many people. But what are the benefits are people seeing in the communities beyond economically?
It's huge benefits, and again, it goes back to one of the reasons that we started this and our vision for where Indigenous tourism was going, and that was the ability for communities to make sovereign decisions about what they want to share within their culture. But also, in order to share your culture, you have to know your culture. You have to know your language and your songs and your stories. And there was a disconnect for a lot of years because of historical residential schools and other things. And so this really did create a resurgence of communities talking to elders and gathering that knowledge, teaching the youth, because the youth are our ambassadors and ones that will carry us forward, and creating that sense of strong identity and pride within their community so that they can share that. So there's a community-based benefit to this that I think is the legacy of Indigenous tourism that will be great for the community for years and years and years.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, to have to relearn your own culture for some young people and to sell it, right? To basically to market it, I hadn't really considered that as much, that the more tourism operators there would be, it would sort of ride a wave of cultural resurgence too. So it's everyone. Like I think you said that earlier, that it's a very win-win situation, isn't it?
I just want to be really clear. We don't sell our culture.
So fair enough. Yes. And my apologies.
and work with our visitors to kind of honor and celebrate who are as Indigenous people. And like I said, we've got such diversity in this province. We are lucky. We're the luckiest province in Canada, not only because we've got so many tourism-based operations out there. It's such a variety of experience that you can have. I mean, you can come to Incomeep or Spirit Ridge Resort here in Osoyoos, and you've got the campground, you've got the beach, you've got the cultural center, you've got golf courses, you've got this incredible winery, you've got this incredibly Indigenous inspired hotel, and you have the ability to connect with Osoyoos Indian band members and Okanagan people to delve a little bit more. So we're encouraging people that during this time of COVID, people are encouraged to staycation or stay within the region. And so we've got a challenge out there for people to, let's do that. Let's take this time, go and find out about the local Indigenous communities, or visit locally and learn and enjoy what Indigenous tourism has to offer.
I was on your website earlier, and I stumbled across a blog post by Kim Gray over at Tucan Canoe. She's a friend of mine. She does a lot of tourism writing, and there was she was talking about some of the things you can expect and about an Indigenous tour operator if you visited. And one of the things that you have touched on quite a bit, and what I was thinking is that how when you bring in that cultural aspect to it, you give context to what you're seeing. I'm thinking back to experiences I've had years ago. Like one comes to mind is a fishing trip I took to the Haida Gwaii about 10 years ago, where I was working for a fishing magazine, and you kind of just like went in and went out, and like I saw the whales and I saw the salmon and I saw the eagles and stuff like that, but there was no context given to any of the experience whatsoever. And I found that it is changing so much that people's desire for more context, rather than just being like you said about the whale watching, that it's like, you don't just go and go, there's a whale, and then take you back into the harbor. You kind of like explain context. And do you think that Indigenous tourism in that has having an effect on the whole industry, as of like people demanding more context to their experience and more interactivity and connectivity?
I certainly hope so, and I think that we have had an impact, and we have changed the industry. In our visitors are demanding more of that richness, and truly. The ability to, when I think about, the bear watching or the whale watching, here within the South Okanagan, we have rattlesnakes, right? People are freaked out about our rattlesnakes. But there's this wonderful video that we released a few weeks ago, and it's called "We Are All Connected." And,
I watched it, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so profound. And we wanted to get that out so that people understood why some of the communities were closed and why they were protecting their communities. That this is not just about protecting the communities, it's about our connection to the land and to the animals and to our communities, and protecting all of that, and that using this as time for healing, which is a powerful message. And I think what you're talking about, that context, is that we're able to communicate to our visitors that as Indigenous people, we're very connected to our land and the history and the animals and the plants here, and we have stories. Like our legends and our teachings are all combined with those experiences that you have. So that context not only provides a richness to that story, but it gives you some insight into the principles and philosophies of Indigenous people and why we feel the way we do about our connection to the land and communities.
Yeah, to anyone listening, I'd highly recommend, you can find that video on their website, and I'll give the link at the end of the show, or I'm sure you can just Google it and find it easy enough, but it's called We Are All Connected. It is called Everything is Connected. And it's a beautifully shot video, and it's got a great message as well. And it does shine some light on not just what's happening now in terms of the time of healing, but as some cultural experience as a whole. I felt that it was beautiful. Yeah, I watched it 3 times, I think, actually.
And my favorite part of the video is that it was narrated by one of the young girls from our community.
I loved that. Yeah, that really caught me off guard at first. I was like, oh, I love this. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really shows that, the youth, they're our leaders of tomorrow. And they're the ones that are going to bring us through this, and they're going to be the ones to make sure that we continue on within our community. Yeah, it was very powerful.
And that's the passing of knowledge as well. Because I have noticed a few of the people I've met in the Indigenous tourism industries in BC and around the country are quite young.
Yeah, and we're very lucky. Many of our youth, I mean, we've got the highest percentage of youth of any population. Like I think 25% of our population is under the age of 25, right? And so we've got, there's lots of opportunities there for them. And the entrepreneurial spirit has been incredible in the last, 15 or 20 years in terms of having those opportunities and support and building the capacity of our youth to move forward. But it all starts from that strong sense of identity and who they are, right? And that's the foundation of Indigenous tourism when it comes to building capacity in our communities.
Earlier, I believe you said that there were 401 Indigenous tourism related businesses in BC, but that's been increasing quite a bit. I was on your website. There's a background. I think it's at 33% over 2014. And can you tell me a bit more about that trend and how? Like that's a incredible increase. Has that been trending for a while, or when you could explain a bit more, give a bit more context to why and how so many businesses are taking off at this time or earlier? I know it's kind of a pause right now, but let's talk a little earlier.
Well, I think that it's always been our focus to grow Indigenous tourism, and we started out with our blueprint strategy 20 years ago, and had some incredible people working on that strategy. And we looked at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 types of businesses, where tier 1 was just communities thinking about it and starting off their businesses. Tier 2, they've already started, but they're not quite market ready, and so did a lot of training, capacity building. And then tier 3 was market ready. So what we've seen over the years is this gradual increase in market ready businesses, and those businesses that meet the market ready criteria. They've got a marketing plan, they've got a website, they may have a storefront. If they don't have a storefront, they do have marketing materials and are able to take reservations or schedule events. And so what we found is that our businesses, many of them are moving up to tier 3. And so that's where the positive growth is. And now we're looking in terms of long-term sustainability. This COVID has, again, had an opportunity for us to kind of sit back, look at how can we best support our stakeholders. And so now we're doing that combination of marketing our stakeholders and but also looking at getting back into the training and capacity building and supporting those those young people that are looking to start tourism-based businesses. So that's where our next step is going to be, and embracing things like digital strategies, how to actually use technology to make these businesses stronger. So
at this time, you're focusing on helping new people build businesses. That's what you're using this sort of tourism break. You're using that pause to help some new people get into the business? Absolutely. We're looking at training programs. We're looking at building capacity, certainly supporting those stakeholders that are having a tough time through COVID, and we'll continue to advocate and support. This year is tough. Next year is going to be tough too, right? A lot of businesses, we don't know where this is going to go. A lot of the businesses are using sort of their cushioned in terms of financial resources to get through this year with limitations on the number of people that can go within their facilities and so next year is going to be another tough year. So we want to continue to sustain our stakeholders and those businesses, try and get them through next year, and really look at hopefully things will calm down, and I don't know if things will ever get back to normal, but hopefully things will calm down by 2022. Yeah, normal. I think that's a phrase we're throwing around a lot about getting back to normal. But I think it's wise to look at that and be like, well, there were some normals that weren't that good anyway. And what does normal look like? I mean, it is a big question. I know because I work so much with tourism operators, and I know that as we're coming through this, there is there's no switch that's going to be flipped that just suddenly turns this off, right? So, and even if there is, even if it eventually happens, there's still going to be such a lasting impact. So it's cool that to think of the future planning as being a goal of your organization and your stakeholders, because it's going to be an interesting future, if nothing else.
Well, and I think we need to embrace the opportunities well, and the learnings and what we've learned. And I hope, at some point, and we're continuing to do this with Indigenous Tourism BC, is like, let's look at where we're at. What are those challenges? What are those gaps? And then how do we quantify those learnings and what we've learned so that can be put into the plan and support our stakeholders in the future? And the one opportunity is that I think tourism itself in general, not just Indigenous tourism, but tourism in this province has, I don't think people have ever seen the importance of it. It's, they're primarily small businesses, and you've got huge resources in this province. You've got forestry, you've got mining, you've got all of those other sectors. I think that people are realizing that when something like this happens, the biggest impact it has is on the tourism industry. And as an economic generator, we're one of the largest economic generators in tourism in general within this province. And so I think that the public and people are realizing, wow, this is an important industry for this province.
Yeah.
Not only from
for sure
standpoint, but from a identity standpoint, and from who we are as British Columbians and Indigenous people, and how that on an international stage is an important consideration.
Yeah. I mean, that's the crazy thing with the COVID-19 pandemic right now, is that I know for a while I've seen tourism being developed in certain areas that might have had economic depression, or say an industry has left, like a resource industry has left, and tourism being this wonderful thing that can come in and revitalize areas in such a wonderfully sustainable way. And and then it felt very safe in a lot of ways, that whereas resources are always boom and bust, and natural resources are boom and bust, and then this pandemic came out and just it exposed some vulnerabilities in tourism that I think a lot of people are scrambling for, but thankfully technology is going to fill some gaps there. But certainly I definitely feel for a lot of operators, particularly in areas that are simply not ready or able to welcome people back anytime soon. Haida Gwaii comes to mind as an area that has been very dependent on tourism, and is just absolutely it's just not safe to go there at all. And who knows when it will be, so the pivot will be important for sure.
Well, and I think it's important to recognize and sort of respect the decisions that those communities are making, whether they're Indigenous communities or small rural towns in northern BC, right? This is something that's impacted all of us. And I think that we're doing well in this province in terms of managing and just keeping that message about staying safe, travel safe, understand where you're going. I really encourage people, and we've tried to set up our website to try and give as much information to visitors as possible. Understand where you're going, and who the Indigenous communities are within that area, and if there's any protocols, if the community is open or not, and then and certainly if the businesses are open, then support them and learn about the Indigenous people within that area and celebrate the history of that area.
Yeah, no, that's a good one to say. It's listen, if they're open, they're open. If they're open for business, go ahead. And how have you found the response, generally speaking, to people going out and saying listen, these are some areas that they're not ready yet. I know you can't speak to every small town, because you've seen that all over. Tofino, for example, is a town closed down for a while, and a lot of mountain towns did. But when you're putting that messaging out from the ITBC, relating that to people that there are areas that they can't go, and how do you sort of make sure that messaging is understood?
Well, part of that messaging was that the video that we produced, the information that we have on the website. We try and keep up to date with which businesses are open and which areas. We have an app, an iPhone app or app that you can download, which is great because it tells you those Indigenous communities within the area. You're traveling in real time, and you're able to see what's available. So we found that information is the most important thing, and then just embracing the message that we have throughout this entire province that we're in this together. And sometimes it may be inconvenient. At the same time, we have a responsibility to each other and to our lands, and whether you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, to respect that and take care of each other. And sometimes that means that you may not be able to access an area that you want to go, but there's also so much diversity within this province that there are other experiences that are open for you, and we encourage people to go find those experiences. I think the other thing is that during this time, it's given our population in BC the opportunity and the invitation to delve deeper within the Indigenous culture and history of this province, and learn more about who we are as Indigenous people and the diversity, and celebrate that as well.
How so? Do you think via the app and via the technology connections? Is that what you mean by delving deeper?
Well, not only the app. I mean, the app will give you information, and it sort of tells you where you're at in the province, and where you can go. If you're coming to Osoyoos, then the app will tell you what's available here. But if there is, as you go into Indigenous tourism establishments, then engage with the individuals there, right? I mean, part of our, the thing that we get in tourism for, and the thing that we love, is our storytelling and our people to engage our visitors and our guests and celebrate our culture. So we're inviting people to engage, social distancing, right?
Yep,
and
of course.
Safe about it. But instead of just coming to Osoyoos and showing up to go to the beach and go to campground, which is great. Let's take some time. You've got some time now to kind of look deeper. We've had people coming here for 30 years, and I was meeting with an older couple at the cultural center a couple of days ago, and they said, we've been coming here for years and years, and the cultural center's been here for 10 plus years, and we've never been here.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's almost like everyone's kind of slowing down a little bit, and that's giving people the space in which to sort of maybe look around a little bit and look a little deeper. I mean, I don't always like to talk about positives coming from COVID-19 because the destruction has been so massive. But if we can take anything from it, that mindfulness hopefully is something that we can carry forward, because I mean, that's really interesting to think that someone had been coming there that long, and this is the first time they've popped in. I'm sure they're not the only one, to find some more context to what they're experiencing. Yeah.
Well, I think that fact it was 40 degrees outside and the cultural center is air conditioned.
Hey,
whatever we can
you gotta do what you gotta do, right? Yeah, I'd like to be there right now. I don't have air conditioning at my place right now, and that sounds pretty nice. Yeah, swim in the lake and then go and spend the afternoon in the cultural center. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we always need to be mindful of the impact that COVID's had on not only on Indigenous Tourism BC, but on the province as a whole. And it's serious. But at the same time, again, going back and taking those lessons and being optimistic on how we're going to move forward. And it really is about sustainability and resiliency. And I'm finding tourism as an industry sector as a whole, they're incredibly resilient, right? And so, we also have to celebrate those messages as well.
And the demand, even if the demand is not going away. I mean, people's inability to travel and to go and do things was like some of the first things people began to mourn at this time. Like I can't go anywhere, I can't do anything. I mean, it was the thing that we love to do, is go out and get experiences. And I know personally, because I like to travel. My wife and I, and we have 1-year-old twins now, so we're probably not traveling as much as we used to, but also this time with the borders being closed, and even as they begin to reopen hopefully soon, it's maybe not, I'm not that interested in international travel for a little while, that it has given me that space and that excuse to look a little closer to home and to see like maybe some of the things that I've been overlooking near me, and to find more context in the things that I've probably taken for granted living on the West Coast for a long time, that thinking like, the Squamish Lillooet Cultural Center in Whistler or something like that, I've actually never been to it before. I should, why not? Like I should go up there and check it out sometime, because now I'm going to be looking at day trips and weekend trips from my house, rather than thinking like, oh, let's go to Hawaii or something like that. So I think that's going to be something that resonates quite a bit, and maybe people will see more local travelers, because I know I've done some work with Destination Canada in the past, and I know internationally Indigenous tourism is such a draw. Maybe there'll be a resurgence of local people wanting to have these experiences too.
Well, we hope so. And I love the fact that you've identified, going on day trips and the fact that you've got 2 young children, right? And that's part of the messaging as well, is that seeing these experiences, even if you've been to, if you've been to a cultural center, or if you've been to an experience, seeing them again through the eyes. I've got a 5-year-old granddaughter, and seeing the world through her eyes is so, just renews my excitement and pride for what we have in this province, right? And so I think that that's an important message too, is that it's really is about experiencing that all together.
Yeah. I've already, they're so young right now, but that will be, I've already seen it so much. It does reinvigorate you quite a bit when you, like I said, maybe have taken some things for granted. And sometimes I do realize that I haven't necessarily searched for that context in my home area as well, which I'll probably be doing more, like have I looked for that context on the trails of the North Shore or something like that, because I'm just so used to it over here that I think if we can take anything from this time as to maybe that's just one of the many things we can take. Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
And even when you look at the city of Vancouver, and I lived in Vancouver for about 10 years, the downtown core, I was walking with one of the Squamish chiefs at one time through the downtown core, and he was pointing out, as we were walking the seawall, he's pointing out these were clam beds.
Wow.
This is where we harvested this, right? People forget that the city of Vancouver is the traditional territory of the Squamish, Lillooet, and Musqueam people. And so those areas were used for harvesting foods, for ceremony, there's so much richness even in the downtown core. And so what we want to inspire visitors and guests, and even in your own town, look for those stories. Look for the Indigenous footprint that has always been there, that is sometimes covered up by concrete and big buildings, and find out the history and the story, because that adds to your pride in where you live, but it also adds to the knowledge of the importance, the historical importance of Indigenous people in this province.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, really to look closely even at almost the ground beneath your feet where I'm living now. That's a lot to think about. Have to do some more research for sure.
Go to the App Store, and the App Store is just type in Indigenous BC, and you should be able to find the app. And certainly we've got tons of resources on our website. Just go explore.
Oh, thanks a lot. I appreciate you spending some time with me today.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. You actually get me very excited. Now I'm going to go and go out and hit the beach.
I'm jealous. Okay, thanks a lot. Transformative travel. That's what it's all about, isn't it? I remember a few years ago, I went hiking in Ivavik National Park in the north of Yukon. After 5 days of some of the most breathtaking scenery I've ever seen, I was scheduled to spend a day in Inuvik and take a day trip up to Tuktoyaktuk with Kyla Kassoon-Taylor of Tundra North Tours. It's an Indigenous cultural experience. I was looking forward to it, but I thought, it can't compare to 5 days of hiking, can it? Well, I often think of that more than I do of those 5 days. That one day was transformative. I hope you learned a lot today about Indigenous tourism in BC and around the country. I hope it piqued your interest. I hope you understand the time of healing that we're in for many of these communities. And I hope you understand that many are open and ready to welcome you. So check out indigenousbc.com and download that app Brenda mentioned too. There's a lot to uncover. Take your time and enjoy. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm David Webb, and hey, live the adventure.